March 7, 1944. 12,000 feet above Brandenburg, Oberleutnant Wilhelm Hoffmann of JG-11 caught the first shimmer of silver on the horizon. A wall of bombers, 400 B-17s, sprawled across the sky like a migrating storm. He had seen this ritual before. The Americans would release their payloads, pivot west, and somewhere near Hanover their escorts would vanish, starved of fuel. Then the slaughter would begin. He checked his gauges. Full tanks. Nearly 3 hours of fighting if he managed his throttle carefully. The Americans' new P-51 Mustangs, with their strange bubble canopies and cartoonish nose art, rarely lingered more than 45 minutes over the target. Their sleek shapes were impressive, but mathematics ruled the sky, not aesthetics. A Mustang burned 65 gallons an hour in cruise and triple that in combat. Even with the British drop tanks, they should have been on fumes by now. The memory of last week's briefing rose unbidden. Major Klaus Bretschneider had practically doubled over when intelligence claimed the Mustangs could fly 5-hour missions. 5 hours, he had scoffed, slapping the table. My grandmother could glide that long. Those Mustangs are shiny Spitfires with larger tanks. They'll turn back at Dummer Lake like always. But today something felt wrong. 2,000 feet below, Feldwebel Ernst Muller's urgent voice cracked through Hoffmann's headset. Klein Feingrupp approaching from the west. They're not breaking off. Hoffmann squinted. The escorts were still hugging the bomber stream, far past the usual point where they turned home. Through the pale haze, he recognized their wing shapes. Unmistakably P-51s. But that was absurd. They should have been limping toward England, engines gasping on vapor. What Hoffmann could not know was that 3 months earlier, inside a converted furniture factory in California, North American aviation had rewritten the limits of fighter endurance. The transformation had begun with a plea from the British in 1940. Fighters needed quickly, in numbers no one else could deliver. North American promised a prototype in 120 days. Most firms required 2 years. Edgar Schmud, their chief designer, barely slept as the draftsmen worked around the clock. The first Mustang, the NA-73X, flew that October. It was competent, but unremarkable. The Allison engine suffocated above 15,000 feet, and the British used the early Mustangs mostly for low-level reconnaissance. Then came the revelation. In April 1942, Rolls-Royce test pilot Ronald Harker flew a Mustang and recognized brilliance buried under mediocrity. The airframe, streamlined, efficient, blessed with a laminar flow wing that sliced through drag, was superior to anything Britain had built. Only the engine held it back. Harker wrote a memo urging the marriage of the Mustang's frame to the Merlin engine. The combination, he argued, would create the best fighter in the world. He was right. The first Merlin-powered Mustang flew in November 1942, and the results were stunning. Speed leapt past 440 miles per hour, ceilings soared beyond 40,000 feet, and most crucially, fuel consumption at high altitude dropped to numbers engineers had barely believed. Lieutenant Colonel Thomas Hitchcock cabled Washington in excitement. New Mustang with Merlin shows fuel consumption only 43 gallons per hour at 25,000 feet. This changes everything. Everything indeed. AP-51D carried 269 gallons internally and 2 110-gallon drop tanks externally. At optimal cruise, burning just 43 gallons an hour, its range exceeded 2,000 miles. From bases in Britain, Berlin was a simple round trip, with enough fuel left to fight. Back over Brandenburg, Hoffmann began his attack run, unaware of the revolution humming beneath the Mustang's cowlings. He led his swarm into a steep dive, the standard tactic of the past 3 years: strike hard, punch through the bomber stream, climb back to altitude before the escorts could react. As he lined up a straggling B-17, his wingman's alarmed shout cut through the static. Mustangs, following us down. That made no sense. Escorts never wasted fuel chasing Luftwaffe fighters into the depths. They couldn't afford it. But these Mustangs were not the escorts of last year. Captain Don Gentile of the 4th Fighter Group had been waiting for this exact moment. His P-51B, Shangri-La, still carried 4 hours of fuel despite having escorted the bombers all the way from England. When he saw the 109s diving toward the formation, he didn't hesitate. Horseback leader, horseback 1, bandits 2 o'clock low, descending. Engaging. Air combat was an unforgiving equation. Altitude was potential energy, speed was kinetic, life was the sum of both. German pilots had mastered this calculus: hit fast, avoid turning fights, and escape on a dive. The Luftwaffe survived by conserving energy and fuel, but the Mustangs could spend both lavishly. Gentile rammed his throttle to war emergency power. The Merlin howled at 3,000 revolutions per minute, devouring 150 gallons an hour. In a Spitfire, such waste guaranteed a crash landing. In the Mustang, Gentile could run 20 minutes at that setting and still fly home. Hoffman glanced back, expecting to see the Mustang peel away. It didn't. It was closing. Fast. Debriefing papers from early 1944 would later capture the shock German pilots felt that day. Hauptmann Friedrich Beck of JG-1 wrote, with disbelief, "The new American fighters behave strangely. They follow us to the deck, far from their bombers. Our old tactic of dragging them away no longer works. Their fuel seems limitless." He wasn't exaggerating. Colonel Hubert Zemke of the 56th Fighter Group had reshaped escort doctrine around the Mustang's new endurance. "Forget shepherding the bombers," he told his pilots. "Your job is to empty the sky of German fighters. Chase them. Hunt them. You have the fuel. Use it." That shift shattered 3 years of German interceptor theory. The Luftwaffe had always counted on the same loophole. Allied escorts would eventually hit their return point. When the little friends turned home, the bombers became exposed, and the hunters of the Reich would descend. The Mustang closed that window and welded it shut. Major Gunther Specht of JG-11 vented his frustration in a March report. "The long-range American fighters appear over our airfields as we land. They dive with us to treetop height. They circle our bases waiting for takeoff. We are hunted in our own skies." The numbers soon reflected the shift. In January 1944, before Mustangs became widespread, the 8th Air Force lost 377 heavy bombers. By May, after Mustangs were flying more than half of all escort missions, bomber losses fell to 148. German fighter casualties told the opposite story: 307 lost in January, for 32 in May. But statistics only hinted at the deeper change: psychology. Lieutenant Heinz Cohn wrote in his diary, "The hunters have become the hunted. We take off knowing the Americans will be waiting. We no longer choose when to fight." With their massive range, Mustang pilots adopted new habits bordering on the reckless. After escorting bombers, they dropped to the deck and tore across Germany looking for anything that moved. Rail yards, airstrips, convoys. Locomotives exploded under their guns. Messerschmitts burned on the ground before leaving the runway. Technical Sergeant Charles Bailey of the 357th Fighter Group recalled, "Early in '44 they bragged about how many bombers they saved. By summer, they were comparing who blew up the most trains." One pilot even returned with branches stuck inside his air scoop. He had flown that low. Germany scrambled to adapt. They fitted their fighters with larger drop tanks, but the fuel savings were nowhere near what the Mustang's laminar flow wing and efficient Merlin allowed. A Bf-109G burned 70 gallons an hour, a Focke-Wulf even more. Even with drop tanks, they simply could not match American range. Desperation led to dangerous new tactics. Mass, company front attacks requiring 40 to 60 fighters were designed to smash through bomber formations in a single devastating pass. But assembling such groups took time, and Mustangs roamed freely, breaking them apart before they could form up. The math of attrition was merciless. Each German pilot lost represented years of irreplaceable training. Each American pilot lost came from a system producing 3,000 new aviators a month. General Adolf Galland saw the inevitable outcome. In a post-war interrogation, he admitted, "The Mustang was decisive not merely because it was superior, but because it was everywhere. Even our training fields in Czechoslovakia were unsafe." American production deepened the nightmare. The Inglewood plant built 20 Mustangs a day. The Dallas plant added 15 more. By December 1944, monthly production reached 630 aircraft. Germany's total wartime production of single-engine fighters barely exceeded 33,000. North American built nearly half that many Mustangs alone. Faster, newer, and uninterrupted by bombing raids. Colonel Johannes Steinhoff of JG-77 summarized the imbalance in a lament written that September. "Their numbers crush us. Worse is their freedom. Our pilots conserve fuel while Americans burn it freely. We calculate each maneuver. They attack without restraint. We fight the arithmetic of the possible. They fight the arithmetic of abundance. Kill ratios reflected the new order. In 1943, German fighters claimed 3 Allied planes for every loss. By late 1944, Mustangs claimed 6 Germans for every Mustang shot down. The top American aces, all flying Mustangs, racked up staggering scores. George Preddy, 26 victories. John Meyer, 24. Don Gentile, 23. These weren't defensive kills. They were hunts. German fighters caught taking off, landing, or desperately trying to limp home. The Mustang's long reach even reshaped the war's training front. Operation Jackpot, launched May 1944, targeted German flight schools. Mustang squadrons flew 700 miles to ambush student pilots in the sky. On May 29th, Mustangs from the 78th Fighter Group intercepted a full training flight over Leipzig, 12 Bf-109s flown by novices. All 12 were shot down in 4 minutes. Oberfeldwebel Siegfried Bethke, an instructor with JG-103, survived one such attack. His recollection was stark. My students had 20 hours in fighters. The Americans had hundreds. It was not combat. It was execution. By December 1944, Germany no longer possessed daylight air superiority, not even over its own territory. The Ardennes offensive launched under one condition: attack only in bad weather. Clear skies meant Mustangs. Mustangs meant annihilation. General der Jagdflieger Gordon Golub explained the despair. Our pilots take off knowing they are already outnumbered 5-1. The Americans have better fuel, better aircraft, better everything. But worst of all, they can follow us home. Fuel shortages soon strangled the Luftwaffe. By early 1945, many units could manage only one sortie a day, sometimes none at all. American pilots, meanwhile, routinely flew double missions, escorting morning raids to Munich, refueling, then guiding afternoon formations toward Frankfurt. Captain Robert Johnson of the 56th Fighter Group described the new normal. We'd shepherd the bombers, then half of us would go hunting. I'd drop to 5,000 feet and fly east until I saw something. Rail lines, convoys, airfields. I once chased a single truck for 30 miles. Why? Because I could. Because I had the fuel. The Mustang even changed the curriculum of air combat training. American pilots learned precise engine settings and cruise parameters that stretched their time over Germany by half an hour or more. German trainees were taught the opposite: how to conserve every drop, how to minimize combat, how to escape before their tanks ran dry. Morale collapsed. Lieutenant Oscar Bush of JG-3 wrote to his wife in February 1945, "The Americans own the sky. We take off and land in darkness. Even then they sometimes catch us, flying without lights, hunting by sound." Last week Weber was shot down with his landing gear down. The American followed him through the entire pattern and killed him 500 meters from the runway. With no strategic alternatives left, German commanders authorized Ramjager, ramming attacks. Pilots were instructed to collide with American bombers and bail out if possible. It was a tactic born not of courage, but of mathematical impossibility. Even these desperate attempts were often thwarted. Mustangs would pick off the ramming fighters long before they reached the bomber stream. The final tallies revealed the scale of devastation. Mustangs flew 213,873 sorties in Europe. They dropped 500,000 gallons of napalm. They fired over 4 million rounds. They claimed 4,950 enemy aircraft. 2,520 Mustangs were lost to all causes. The arithmetic was brutal. 1 Mustang lost for every 85 sorties. 2 German fighters destroyed for every Mustang shot down in combat. But the decisive figure was this. By April 1945, the average German fighter pilot had less than 50 hours in their aircraft. The average Mustang pilot had over 400. Germany had run out of pilots long before it ran out of planes. General der Flieger Joseph Schmid summarized the collapse in his post-war analysis. "The Mustang defeated us not by being the best dogfighter, though it was excellent, but by existing everywhere. We had no sanctuary. Our training bases, our airfields, our approach paths, all were vulnerable. Our skill became irrelevant." The lesson echoed through every flaming wreck across Europe. The F-22 Raptor of the modern era, for all its sophistication, still has a combat radius of only 600 miles. The Mustang, crafted with slide rules and intuition, fought at 750 miles from home. Distance, not agility, had remade the battlefield. And at the center of that transformation was a simple truth: endurance shapes supremacy. Wilhelm Hoffmann, the same German pilot who had first seen the bombers over Brandenburg, survived the war. In a 1985 interview, he reflected on the moment he realized everything had changed. "We trained for short, sharp battles. Attack, dive away, land." The Mustang pilots fought like they had all day, because they did. When I finally shot one down in January 45, I had so little fuel I glided the last 10 kilometers. As I climbed from my cockpit, another Mustang strafed the field. He had followed me home, watched me land, waited. That was when I understood we were no longer the hunters. The mathematics of air warfare had been rewritten above Germany's cities. Distance divided by fuel consumption, multiplied by aggression, equaled air supremacy. It was an equation solved not in chalk on a board, but in aluminum, gasoline, and the courage of pilots who fought at the edge of the possible. The Mustang fulfilled the prophecy Ronald Harker made years earlier. It became the best fighter in the world, not merely for how it turned or climbed, but because it redefined what a fighter could do and where it could do it. The laughter that once echoed through German briefing rooms disappeared, replaced by stark survival statistics. The Luftwaffe's vaunted hunters learned a final, merciless truth. When your enemy can fly anywhere, you can fly, and stay there longer. Skill and bravery become footnotes beneath overwhelming logistics. The Mustang didn't just escort bombers. It extended American reach to every corner of Hitler's Reich. It demonstrated that modern air superiority belongs not to the most agile aircraft, but to the force that can place the most fighters in the most places for the most time. It was a simple equation, and North American aviation solved it with a British engine, an American airframe, and an idea that changed the war.